Hi, and welcome to another Windows Studios After Effects and Cinema 4D tutorial. I'm Mackenzie Criswell, and today we're going to be taking a look at creating cinematic intros. Alright, so as you just saw, what we're looking at today is a very cool design, kind of based around this nice cloudy light design. We've got some nice metallic text actually created inside of Cinema 4D, and just a very cool, organic looking design. And this one is one of my favorites that I've made thus far, one of my favorite motion graphic designs, because it's very photorealistic. We have this crazy, fantastical element. You don't even know what it is, but it just looks real. It looks flawless and very good. And so it's probably the best thing about this design is the fact that, of course, it looks photorealistic and real and amazing, but it's also super easy to create. There's 1,000 different ways you could create it and 1,000 different possible outcomes. So it's really just the kind of effect that via a whole bunch of experimentation and just tweaking a few little details just a little bit, you can create a whole bunch of different designs. And that's pretty great from the motion graphic artist's standpoint, because you do a project for a client 1 month, and then the next month you open up the exact same project file and tweak a couple of dials and change the text, and hey, you've got an entirely different design to sell to your new client. And how did you do that so fast? I don't know. Just recommend me to all your friends. It does kind of suck when you're making a tutorial, though, because, But anyways, we'll go ahead and get started with this, and I hopefully won't waste any more of your time. So we'll create a new composition. I like to use 1920 by 817, which is an anamorphic resolution. It's 2.35 to 1. Also use 15 seconds long for this one. So we should actually probably name this composition fractal, let's see, cinematic tutorial. And the first thing we need to do is create a new solid. Shortcut for that's Command Y. I feel like that's pretty universal, but I do like to stick to just the basic menus when doing a tutorial. We'll make it black, okay, and we'll go ahead and just name this light burst. There'll probably be about 10 or 15 of these layers copied, so keep that in mind. And more or less what we need to do with this layer is use it to create a small white dot. And the entire design is based off of just a very tiny little white dot in the center. And that opens up a lot of possibilities, because you can do it the way I did and use optical flares. And that allows you to control the intensity very easily and do a lot of very dynamic things with it. You can do it by just creating a layer. Another option that I actually didn't try because I just did not have enough time to was you can try using a particle simulation. CC Particle World, I believe, is the name of the one in After Effects, and there's also Particular, which I think most people have. And that both of those will give you some interesting results. So there's, like I said, this is the first part of it, just 1,000 different ways to get started, and then once we add the other parts, there's 1,000 different ways to tweak it to create a whole bunch of different designs. And just really quickly, by the way, if you create something cool and you want to show it off, you can tweet it to me at Mac_Criswell on Twitter. So we'll come up to Effect and choose Optical Flares. This is the way that I like to do it, just my preference. That way you can control the intensity and all that relatively easily. Okay, so once we've got optical flares added, we'll just center up this point in the middle here. You can probably just estimate for this. It doesn't have to be precise, but if you do like it to be precise, a cool trick with optical flares, the center position is obviously the position directly in the middle. So if you just make the X and Y values of the position XY the same as the center position for your comp. Oh yeah. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is actually transform this into a white dot, because if we tried to use this now, it wouldn't particularly look the way that we want it to. What we'll do is just hop over into options for optical flares, and unfortunately there's not a way for me to get this entire window to fit in here. It just won't scale right, so we'll just have to deal with this. But what we can do is edit the plugin with you guys seeing it. So first things first, we'll clear all. We'll come over to lens objects and choose a simple glow, and we'll make the brightness really small and scale it up a touch. So we just want a glow about this size. Drop that on there, and then we'll add the effect turbulent displace. So just drop that on there. And this is a really great plugin. It's one of my favorites inside of After Effects. And basically what it does is displaces whatever you put it on top of via a whole bunch of different controls. So if we're just going to flip it on and off, you can see it's just kind of moving the object down and to the left currently. And if we were to change the evolution, we could see it's kind of rotating around the circle more or less. But the control that we actually want to mess with right now is the one called complexity. And as we turn this up, it adds different pieces and makes it more complex. And so you can see we've basically already done what we wanted to do. And so if you play around with the amount, you can have it kind of spread out like crazy. And then the size will kind of have it be eating away at the edges of the light. And there's a lot of really cool different things you can do with it. This is where the real tweaking comes into play, is just playing around with the complexity and then the amount and the size. One other really cool effect I noticed was that if you scale this down a lot and then turn up the amount, you get a very cool kind of design that's great for like a background. This seems to be where it would kind of leave the photorealistic zone and kind of go more towards kind of video game quality effects, but either way, it still looks great to me. And so more or less the rest of this design is actually just playing around with the way that these are created and adding them in different spots, changing the amount, the size, the scale, the complexity of them, and just really kind of organizing them in a way that you think looks cool. I think I played around with all the different layers for about 3 hours before I even started adding color correction and all that good stuff to it. So you can really mess around with these as precisely as you want until you get it to look the way you do. And the way you would do that is just change the blending mode to screen, or lighten will pretty much just remove the black, but screen looks fine. Okay, screen. Then you would make a duplicate copy, and you do that by choosing Edit, Duplicate. Of course, the shortcut for that is Command D. And we'll just move around the flare, and you can also move around the position of the offsetting. So you can move either the flare or the offset position, doesn't really matter. And let's see, turn up the amount on scale, and you just kind of want to start messing around with these. Okay, now I got a cool looking design. If you have an effect that looks good, but you just want to like add some contrast to it, curves is a great effect to add some nice kind of waveform or linear contrast to it. That way you can get some nice effects without screwing too much up. Okay, and so we'll call this a good kind of base design right now. This would be great, But what we also want to add is these cool kind of longer flares. And we'll just go ahead and create those. So reset or turbulent displace effect. Actually, we'll just delete it, completely get rid of it, and into the curve effect. And reset optical flares, options, alright, clear everything. Yeah, create glow. And scale it up, bring down the brightness, scale it up, bring down the brightness. And then what I'll do is add another glow, and this one I'll stretch outward a lot to create a nice bright kind of flare like that. And then we'll go ahead and drop on turbulent displace. And more or less we just crank up the complexity and that's it. Again, messing around with the size and the amount, we'll do some pretty wacky stuff to the effect, so feel free to do that. I put this below the first two layers because the first two layers were used to kind of add color to our title, and then I made a copy of it and kind of tossed up the amount. So, and then I think I lowered the opacity of it to about 50. So very subtle kind of adjustment to it. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is start to add a color grade, and we'll do that by just adding new layers. So layer new solid. And if we hit this button here, it'll make an adjustment layer. We'll go ahead and add a tint effect on here. Again, a very quick way to desaturate the entire thing. We'll drop on curves and start to mess with this a little bit. First things first, we'll add some contrast. Drop on another curves. I use a lot of curves while I'm grading. Okay. The shadows. Gonna knock up some brightness if we can. We'll add glow. A very, very light glow here. So only the brightest parts of it. Basically nothing. It's a very subtle bit of it. And then another curve. And we can start to add some actual color. So, first things first, we'll come over to the blue and raise up the blue in the shadows. Do the same thing with the green. And then we'll pull out the red in the shadows. Okay. Maybe pull out a little more of that green. Okay, we'll bring some more green into the midtones and also touch up with a little bit more blue in the midtones. Knock some of the blue out of the highlights. Bring in some red into the highlights. Get it all out of the midtones. We just want it to be in the very highlights. And we'll do the same thing with green. Okay. Now we'll add a very intense glow to it. That's going to knock a lot of warm color into the highlights. So, we'll start, keep that about where it is. We'll make it a very big radius. And you can see it's already starting to do what we do. We'll just starting to do what we want it to. We'll just change the A and B colors to intensify what it's doing. And get a nice warm color here. Okay, I like to make it a pretty large radius, and then duplicate a copy and make this one a lot less intense in a very selective part of the image. And bring down the radius some. And so the last part of the color grading process is to add a vignette to the image. And The way to do that is just with a new solid and then an elliptical mask around the edge. So kind of like that. And I like to change it to subtract. And then feather it out about 500 or so pixels. And then go ahead and make it an adjustment layer. Okay, so we'll throw on curves to this vignette. We'll drop the mid-tone some. We'll leave the highlight and the shadow alone for the most part. We're just going to drop the mid-tone a touch. Okay. And the other thing I want to do is bring in a lot of red. So, red in the mid-tones, red in the highlight, sorry. Red in the mid-tones. Red in the shadows. Well, probably not. It's not that intense. Okay, if we come down to the mask options, we might want to expand this mask a little bit and make it about 100, maybe about a 75 pixel expansion so that it'll make more of the image warm. Let's see here. And then we'll do some green, add highlight, bring it up a lot, in the mid-tone again. Ooh, not that much. Huh. That's probably the hardest part about designs like this, is just finding the balance between all the different colors. You can also just do a tint effect. I think I ended up doing that in the original anyways. And you basically use the same colors as you did with the glow. And so, okay. Okay, so this isn't nearly as intense of a look as the other one, and if you wanted to add some of that intensity, you could just make a duplicate copy, and let's see, shove it over in the corner, maybe down here, really far off into the corner, and then just turn up the scale, so that'll give it more of that cross-colorization that we were going for. And so really quickly, we'll just kind of animate this. So if we select the light burst layers, you'll come to the end and keyframe the amount, size, and yeah, just amount and size for all these. So come down here, amount, size. Okay, and that will be the keyframe for the end of our animation. And then what we'll do is jump to the beginning and just screw it all up. So make it really large, offset it. It's basically, the idea is just to offset it some. In the original, what I did was I put an expression on all of the evolution options, and so I just did like time times 150 or something like that, and then just change it up, and it created some cool evolution throughout. So the other thing we need to do is create a flash animation. So for that we need to, get these two layers solo. And what we want to do is basically create a light burst. And the way that we'll do that is with optical flares. We'll keyframe the brightness and scale, go forward about 2 frames, and then burst up the brightness and the scale like a lot. And then go down about 3, maybe 5 frames, and return them to normal. So 100 and 100. So now we've got our animation for our text to come in, and we'll want to go ahead and line it up on the point where we want it to come in. Okay, so here's our burst of light. Keep in mind the glow will magnify whatever light you put there, so just kind of keep that in mind. So the next thing we'll do is go ahead and create our logo inside of Cinema 4D. Alright, so inside of Cinema 4D, we'll go ahead and create a 3D title really quickly. So in Cinema 4D, it's relatively straightforward. you come up to your lines and choose text. You type whatever you want, so it's cinematic. And we'll pick a font. I used Ironclad in the original. We can go ahead, rotate around the camera if you hold down Alt. Of course, the mouse wheel will scroll you out some. And Alt plus the middle mouse button will move it. Okay. And what I'll do is go ahead and create a new camera based on this view. So just camera. What we can do is add in a NURB object called extrude, drop it onto the text, drop the text onto it. So we'll come to extrude and extrude it out about 100 centimeters. What we want to do is actually create a bevel, because right now it's just extruding. So the way that we can do that is by using what's called a fillet cap, and that fillets it out and then caps it. So we'll bring down the size of that fillet to about 1. Turn up the steps to about 64, I think is pretty good with most 3D, and that just gives it a nice bevel on the side. Okay. You can also change the fillet type. I like to make things concave and convex, play around with that particular feature. That's a very cool thing to give it a different look. We'll create a copy of this, so Command C, Command V, and we'll just knock it back some. And then we'll come to the extrude and turn up the size of the fillet cap. So all we're doing. And we'll turn down the steps to 0 and make it convex. Really quickly, I'll come into the render settings and just set this up to render for what we need. 1920 by 817. That's our render area. We don't need a frame rate because we're just going to be rendering out one image. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is create some materials. If you just double click twice, you'll have 2 materials. You can drop one onto your extruded object here, and another one onto your other extruded object. And if we just click here, we can open up some material properties. And the back material is pretty straightforward. We just make it a very dark gray. We'll come, of course, we want to add a lot of reflection to it. And we use an environment texture. And we're not using Element 3D for this tutorial, but we are actually using some of the environment textures from it because we already paid for the plugin. So why not just go ahead and use environment textures that came with it. And we'll use the roof image that came from it. And it'll tell you it's not in the search path, but you can basically just add that in. And then crank up that some. And we'll bring down the color of it again to be a very dark reflection. Okay, and our second material is even easier. We make it gold. Boom. Reflection and an environment. Reflection, same warm gold color. Well, hang on. Let's see. Do that. Okay, the environment. It's again our gold. And that same roof image. Yes, add it to the search path, and we're good to go. Okay, so we'll come back into the render settings, choose save, and now we can choose where we want to save this. And we'll just save it as logo, and we'll make sure that we're using a PSD, not a PSD, a PNG. Color profile, just the default sRGB. We do want an alpha channel. Don't have it interlaced, and now we should be good to go. As soon as you hit render, it'll render out your image, and we'll be good to jump right back over into After Effects. Alright, so once we finish rendering the logo, we'll just come over and drop it below the first 2 layers, above the 2 light layers, and it'll come in like this. So we'll just hit Command-Shift-D to cut it. And it'll just kind of pop on, but in the brightness no one will notice. Okay, so if we go forward 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever number of frames you want, we'll see it's been added in and it looks pretty nice. So we'll just kind of scale it down and get it looking nice. I had it scaling down the entire time. And here you can see it's more behind kind of a foggy cloud. And you can mess with how much it's hiding behind by just literally adjusting which layers it's behind. So if it's behind a lot of layers, it'll look like it's behind a lot of stuff. If it's not, it won't look like it's behind as much stuff. So now you can see we've got our text in here and it's looking pretty nice. And what we want to do is add a quick addition to this. So we'll duplicate a copy and choose the fill effect. Fill. And we'll go ahead and change that to white. And we'll add an effect called CC Radial Blur. And underneath the glow, we'll turn up the fading zoom. Turn it to fading zoom. Turn up the amount. And underneath the glow, what it'll do is create some cool light rays. And you can, of course, do this using the actual plugin called Light Rays in After Effects. Unfortunately, it does kind of make it look pretty fake using the actual plugin called Light Rays. So this is a way that I like to do it. So we'll have it start over here, have it go for a couple of frames, and then just finish up way on the other side. Okay. And just a basic animation, and then we'll have it fade out as it reaches the end. And that's just another cool thing to kind of transition in the text and make it look like it's not so random just popping in. One thing we can do is add a little subtitle down here. I added this little bit, cinematic intros, and that'll just give it a nice touch. But anyways, there you have it. Quick and seems like a pretty simple technique to create some interesting design. Really like it. Like I said, it's got a lot of possible outcomes. I can see this being used for a whole lot of different things. But anyways, I'm Mackenzie Criswell, and see you later.